Hiya guys, and welcome to another episode of Jamie Parry Property. Today we are going to be talking about everything auction. So that is, how does the auction process work? What are the key things we need to be aware of? Any differences between that and buying through the traditional channels? How you can be best prepared, and anything else you need to look out for on the day of auction. Plus, we are going to be talking about what is modern method of auction. Who knows? Joining me today, long-term friend of mine and a top property lawyer. His name is Jonathan Smart, and he is a partner at Insight Law based in Cardiff. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. It's my first venture into the community of Jamie Parry's property. So yeah, nice to be here.
Well, you're in good hands. You're in good hands.
Obviously, slightly different, do it over a video call, but we'll do our best to sort of muddle on through anyway.
Yeah, that's it. You know, you can only do what you can do. So, John, if I'm looking to buy at auction, I've put in a bid and it's been accepted. What happens next from a legal perspective?
Yeah, so once the bid is accepted, that's what they say is when the hammer falls. That is the point at which you've exchanged. So that's when you start to become legally responsible for that property from the point of exchange. So it's very different to your standard transaction where it can take a number of weeks to get to that point, sometimes months. So you will then have to pay your 10% deposit at that point as well. Traditionally, that would be in the auction house, but obviously at the moment that's online generally. So it would be a different style where usually it'd be a credit card, debit card, something like that they would take your payment from. You'd instruct your solicitors and start the process. And again, it would then be dependent on your auction, dependent on the number of days you're given, but generally speaking, it's 20 working days, 28 clear days. That's what you normally have with an auction, but do be mindful of reviewing the special conditions because it can be less. I've seen as few as 10 days previously, which doesn't give you long to get your finances and your legals in order as well.
So if you're going to auction then, you need to be prepared. If you're buying a property, if you're putting a bid on a property, you need to be prepared that as soon as that hammer falls, you could potentially be legally obligated to buy that. Right?
Certainly, yes. You're definitely legally obligated to do so because at the point at which, as I said, the hammer falls, it's exchanged and therefore you're already obliged to buy it and the time is already ticking on you, and it does go fast with an auction purchase. Time moves quickly in terms of how much you've got to do and what you've got to get done in that time frame. So making sure that you've got your solicitors already instructed. Obviously, as a solicitor, I would be quite risk averse and tell you that you have to get your solicitor to review the auction pack before you bid anyway. And then also, if you're using a broker or if you're looking to take finance over that property, whether that's a mortgage or bridging finance or some other type of loan against that property, making sure that's set up ahead of time so that you're not already losing time once the exchange has taken place at auction.
So I'm always a big advocate of, if you're doing something that's outside of your comfort zone or that's outside of your field of expertise, you should be speaking to an expert. You spoke then about reviewing the auction pack, or some people do it themselves. Why wouldn't you do it yourself, and why would you use a solicitor to do that?
Many of our clients and many people who we deal with would prefer to review the packs themselves because by the very nature of what they do, maybe they're looking at many auctions and many different legal packs at any one time. So as you can imagine, the costs then would rise quite quickly. Generally speaking, if someone is buying a property at auction, we would always say it's better, safer to get a solicitor to review the pack, because what happens with an auction is that the seller and their solicitors and the auction house will put the auction pack online. The lots are sort of listed online and the auction house will put the legal pack together, and that will include the special conditions of auction, which is very, very important to make sure you read those carefully. But then also the legal title plan, any deeds and documents and conveyances that stem from the legal title, and then also your search reports and other ancillary documents, things like your gas safety certificates, electrical reports, and an EPC. So it's always important to make sure all of those things are read, understood, and would fit in with your buying criteria. It's important to make sure you've got someone there, like you said, who can read and understand that legal pack for you, but also package it up and give you an explanation of whether it's suitable, security for a lender, and suitable for you to purchase and do what you want with it, really, as well.
When you talk to the older generation, they'll always warn you against buying at auction. Do you think that is more to do with the time constraints that are associated with buying at auction, or is it some of these sort of hidden special conditions, if you like?
It can be tricky because obviously with the nature of an auction, you're not usually given as much time or certainly as much sort of ability to review, raise inquiries as you would in a standard purchase, whereby your solicitor will receive the legal pack, raise inquiries with the seller's solicitors. You'll also then get your searches after a few weeks. You can then raise further inquiries, get your responses. If you're not happy with those responses, you can raise further inquiries. So you're given much more time to sort of maneuver around the legal points, engage with the seller's solicitors and the sellers to be able to resolve any questions and queries you have. With an auction legal pack and with an auction purchase, it's very much take it as it is. Each auction will have different costs associated with it, from the auction house firstly, but also then from the seller and their solicitors and any other costs that they wish to associate with the purchase of the property. So, reviewing the legal pack, but also the special conditions is very important, because usually in the special conditions, you'll find certain costs that will be not at the seller, but they'll be for the buyer to cover. So that can be legal fees, search fees, auction house, a buyer's premium, lots of different things, some of which can be quite small and quite manageable, some of which can be really quite hefty costs into the tens of thousands.
Have you got any examples of sort of odd special conditions that you've come across? You've mentioned some, I'll call them hidden fees. A professional such as yourself wouldn't call them hidden fees, but what about other special conditions? Anything that you've come across that's particularly rogue?
Yeah, I suppose I wouldn't necessarily call them hidden and rogue, perhaps, but there are certainly things that people will package up within a legal pack that you just need to have a really keen eye, and that's why we'd always advise clients to instruct a solicitor just to make sure that they can protect your interests, because you're making a usually a very substantial purchase at auction, and it's worth making sure you've got all your ducks in a row and you're happy with what you're buying and you understand all the costs, not just from buying the property, but all the other associated costs of dealing with the auction house as well. There's other things as well that you need to look at and try and resolve with your solicitor to make sure that what you're buying is a genuinely good asset for you for the future, whether you're looking to buy and hold or flip the property, refurbish it. It's just about making sure whatever is in that legal pack is genuine and proper.
To do a very brief recap then, for a buyer to be as well prepared as they possibly can, they need to review the legal pack, review the auction pack, speak to their solicitor if possible. Anything else that I've missed on that?
Yeah, like we said earlier, speaking to your broker if you're looking to take finance on the property. Always good to sort of have early engagement with your property professionals, making sure that that's all sorted. And again, sometimes speaking to an insurance broker or your insurance specialist is useful to make sure that the property can be insured on a reasonable and normal level, because you then have other issues that can stem from that, because maybe if there's a high risk of flooding or subsidence, ground movement, things like that, it can also cause problems. So, engaging with your property professionals through the process is important. Early engagement with those property professionals is also helpful, because it puts you on the right steps to sort of then, if you do proceed with the property and your bid is successful and your solicitors are already aware of the property, already maybe have the file open and have already reviewed the legal pack, it then is much simpler for them to proceed with the purchase. Same for your broker. If they've already reviewed it and already guided you on the basis of whether you want a mortgage or bridging finance, for example, maybe that's something we can come on to, but they may be looking at different options for you.
We're as well prepared as we can be. We've spoken to all our property professionals. We're at the day of auction. Is there anything that we need to look out for on the day of auction?
Yeah, good question, actually. It's important to speak with the auction house, obviously, to ask if there are any late changes, because what you can find is that very often at auction, the legal pack can change through the process. So sometimes if you viewed it a week or two prior, maybe there's other documents, other additional bits of information that have been added to that legal pack, and that can happen up to the day of auction. So making sure that you do a final review, make sure nothing's changed in the auction pack, just for your protection.
I've seen the term modern method of auction bandied about. Is that not your homes under the hammer type auction? How does that work?
Modern method of auction is something that's come around in the last few years, really. We've been dealing with it for clients of ours, and it's a bit of a strange one, because it's not your sort of standard purchase where you go through the normal processes, but it's also not what we would consider an auction either. It's kind of between the two. So what seems to happen, generally speaking, is that a client will speak with an agent or an auction house, agree a price for the property, and then pay usually quite a large reservation fee. So whereas with an auction, you pay your deposit, and that deposit then is 10% of the purchase price, and then obviously deducted from the amount you pay on completion. With the modern method of auction, what you're paying is a reservation fee. So it's non-refundable, and it doesn't reduce what you pay on the balance at completion. If you're buying a house for 100,000 and the reservation fee is £10,000, you still pay another full 100,000 on completion. Whereas with an auction, standard auction, you would pay your 10%, so your 10,000 at exchange, and then 90,000 would be the balance on completion.
How is that attractive for a buyer then, this modern method of auction? It seems just like you're racking up unnecessary costs.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I suppose what they try to do is price the property effectively so that it's, to coin the common phrase, below market value, which makes it attractive for normal buyers, but also investors. And again, it can be an effective way to buy a property. You just need to make sure you're factoring the structure of the deal into your numbers, because that reservation fee, if you can't then proceed for whatever reason, you're not necessarily going to get any of that back. So it just needs to be, you're going into it with your eyes wide open to understand that the reservation fee is payable up front, non-refundable, and then you're signing up to a certain agreement to buy the property within a certain time. But it's not the same as an exchange of contracts. Usually with modern method of auction, you have maybe 50 to 60 days to complete the purchase. So you have much longer than a standard auction, which I suppose is another attraction for your investors to look at, because it gives you a little bit more flexibility. Whereas with an auction, it can be very difficult to sort of squeeze a mortgage into that time frame. So your 20 working days, your 28 clear days, difficult to get a mortgage in principle, valuation offered, and then funded in that time frame. Whereas your sort of 50 to 60 days does usually allow for a mortgage to be completed within that time frame. But obviously you just need to understand that there are costs at the front end that you'll be hit with as well that won't be refundable. And again, very often people are paying the reservation fees before their solicitors or legal advisors have seen the legal pack.
It sounds like you really need to know that property is for you and that it's a solid bet before you go into that if you're buying through the modern method.
Yeah, very much akin to a normal auction purchase, but just that you have a little bit more extra time. You've not exchanged at the point of which you pay the reservation fee, but the kicker is it's non-refundable.
So picking up on what you said a second ago about mortgages being difficult to crowbar into that finite period between exchange on the day of hammer falls and when you complete on that property, is that why a lot of investors would then tend to go with either a cash purchase or a bridging loan?
Yeah, again, another good question. It's the key to sort of buying at auction, I suppose, is being able to be flexible and quite fast paced. Because of the nature of auctions, it is very tricky to try and get a mortgage done in that time. We've done it for clients and we've seen it done, but we've also seen it go wrong for people as well.
And I suppose there's a fairly good infrastructure of companies available who are used to dealing with people who specifically buy at auction up and down the country.
That's right. Yeah, there's a number of different places you can go. But again, I'm probably not best placed to speak to that. But I would say, again, early engagement with a broker who could guide you through that if you're not an experienced investor. Many investors will already have their bridging lender in place. But if you're looking to step onto the property investment ladder and looking to step onto buying a property at auction for the first time, I think early engagement with a broker who can sort of analyze for you and guide you in the right direction of two bridging lenders who can really assist in auction purchases and the tight timeframes you're working in. I think it would be really beneficial to a purchaser to be able to evaluate the deals then from their perspective, how much deposit they need, what their exit strategies are, because obviously that's vitally important of making sure, especially in the current climate, you've got more than just one out for yourselves.
It all comes back to what you were saying, and what we always say is speaking to the experts and being well prepared before you venture into anything like this. A lot of that is common sense, but I think it's always worth reiterating those points, especially with an auction. It's a traditional auction now. It's quite a fast-paced environment, quite easy to get swept up in things, go beyond your means slightly, and then try and dig your way out of that hole afterwards can be quite tricky.
Definitely, and I think that's one key point to mention, is that if you are going to bid at auction, and if you are looking at whether it's one lot or a number of lots, making sure you give yourself a certain point that you won't go past on a property, because obviously there's a point at which it becomes not financially viable as an investment property.
Fantastic. That's been really good, John. Is there anything that we've missed? We've talked sort of largely around your area of expertise there. Obviously, I appreciate you can't make any professional comment on the bridging and the mortgage side of things, however much you might have an inkling to. Is there anything that we haven't picked up on?
I think we've covered the main points. I mean, in terms of just giving an overview and a sort of summary of the points we've covered, I think, as we've said, making sure you've got the members of your team involved who you need to involve with an auction purchase, making sure you've touched base with the broker, solicitor, reviewed the legal pack, make sure you've spoken to the auction house and got a feeling from them of the position as well, giving yourself an upper limit of where you would go on a certain lot, how high you'd be willing to bid, because you can get sort of driven up when you start to see the bids rising up and up and up. And, people thought that wouldn't happen with online auctions, but we're seeing a lot of activity on the online auctions, and it shows that sort of buyer engagement and that buzz that people get from sort of bidding on lots is still there. So giving yourself that limit of where you'll go is really important. And I think just understanding what it means to buy a property at auction. As soon as that hammer falls, as soon as your bid is accepted, you've exchanged contracts. That property is your responsibility, and completing within the time frame that's put on by the auction house, you've then got that responsibility. What flows from that is making sure you've got your funding in place, making sure your solicitor in place, and making sure you've taken appropriate steps to protect yourself in the lead up to the agreement of buying that property. John,
that's been really, really insightful. I'm sure everybody watching has appreciated it. And thanks for taking the time again. If people want to know more or want to use your legal services, how do they get in touch with you?
So we're Insight Law, so we're based in Cardiff, but we've got an office in Bristol as well. We've got a residential department, we've got a buy-to-let department, which is my department, and we've got a commercial department as well. But if anyone needs anything, there's the website, www.insight-law.co.uk, or my email address is jsmart@insight-law.co.uk.
Fantastic. Thanks again for your time, John.
No problem at all.